Hi, guys. So, today's episode is going to be on another Hollywood murder mystery. This one is from the 1930s involving comedic actress Thelma Todd. Um, she was quite popular at the time in the 1930s because she was leading the pack of actors who were making the transition from silent films into the talkies, and she, had only worked maybe 10 years, but had done over 100 films in that time, and had worked with the Marx Brothers and a couple of others, so she was very popular and definitely hardworking and had, quite an accomplished resume, just even in that short period of time. But she was involved with a couple of other things along the side as well, mostly in to do with her relationships. She was involved with certain well-known gangsters, and that might have been possibly, led to her demise. But that is, I guess, something that we'll discuss a little later on when we get to the theories involving her somewhat suspicious death. So this article comes to us from HollywoodlandPod.com, and let's begin. With big blue eyes, golden locks, and a dazzling smile, Thelma Todd was exactly what Hollywood was dying for as they transitioned from the dramatically over-the-top acting of the silent film era to the more realistic and lifelike performances of the talkies. But Todd's fame came to a swift end when her lifeless body was found in the driver's seat of her Lincoln convertible in the garage of her ex-lover's ex-wife, just blocks away from Todd's swanky Malibu restaurant turned nightclub, where she hosted Hollywood's elite. Living the life of a young Hollywood star is the dream for many, but for old Hollywood starlet Thelma Todd, or Hot Toddy, as she was known in Hollywood, the final scene turned out to be a nightmare. After Todd's body was found in the closed garage, local authorities quickly deemed it an accidental suicide. But is there more to the story than meets the eye? So this is an image of Thelma Todd. She was quite attractive. I think she had won the Miss Massachusetts contest and had also been a contestant in the Miss America contest, so she was very attractive, and she also had this particular bend for comedic acting, and so, the combination was something that worked very well for her during her film career. In the 1930s, there was a time of massive transition in Hollywood with the invention of the Vitaphone that allowed movies to record sound. The transformation from silent films to talkies proved to be too much for some stars, but Thelma Todd was up for the challenge. With quick wit, spot-on comedic timing, and dazzling good looks, Todd made a point to let Hollywood know she was going to be there a while. Described as one of the most famous comedic actresses of that time, Hot Toddy seems to have had it all, but as it turns out, that was just a facade. Thelma Alice Todd was born in 1905 in Lawrence, Massachusetts. She came from a well-to-do family, with her father being a respected local politician and her mother, Alice Todd, a, quote, very proper housewife. After getting jobs as a school teacher, Todd entered the Miss Massachusetts Beauty Contest in 1925. She had always wanted to be a star, and she ended up winning the title and moved on to the Miss America pageant. And while she didn't win the Miss America pageant, Todd did get discovered by a talent scout from Paramount and decided to make her way to Hollywood to make her dreams a reality. With an unbridled spirit and unwavering drive, Hot Toddy was determined to live the life of the rich and famous. At that time, many of Hollywood's elite were being phased out because they couldn't cut it with the invention of sound in the films, but Todd, having a good voice and good vocal control, used this to her advantage. At that time, her physical comedy and unprecedented bravery as a comedian had yet to be seen from a woman. She was the total package. This immediately shot her to the top of Hollywood's hot list and earned her a place among Hollywood's elite, a pretty prestigious club to be in, if you ask me. And she appeared in such films as Marx Brothers' Monkey Business, as well as a number of comedic films with Hal Roach Studios, and acted with Charlie Chase, Laurel and Hardy, Gary Cooper, and William Powell, to name a few. She absolutely dazzled on screen. People just loved her because she had sparkling feel to her, and that came across on screen. Film historian Mark Wanamaker states she appeared in 119 films during her lifetime. That's quite a number for someone who had only been in Hollywood for just a decade before her mysterious death. After her time with Paramount, she was quickly snatched up by Hal Roach Studios, and with so many of the silent film stars stuck in that style of acting, those up-and-comers who could handle both the dialogue and the physicality of acting got a chance to shine, with Thelma Todd leading the pack. While in between pictures at Hal Roach Studios, Todd was loaned out to another studio to work on a picture with up-and-coming hotshot director Roland West. While working on the film, West and Todd became close, incredibly close. West convinced Todd that she could be more than just the funny girl, and persuaded her to take herself seriously, and he suggested a total revamp of her career, including a name change to Allison Lloyd, to give her the chance to start over as a dramatic actress. West was so serious about the plan that he instructed everyone working on the picture, including billing, to call her Allison from now on. Todd was completely on board because she was in love with West. West knew this and used it to his advantage, being as he was a married man and had no plans of leaving his wife. His wife, yes, she was Jewel Carmen, a former prostitute who had turned a silent film star and who had a reputation for gambling and all other things nightlife. Carmen was very aware of her husband's relations with Todd, and on more than one occasion she is said to have turned the other way. In the early 1930s, Todd bought a piece of land on the Pacific Coast Highway in Malibu, facing the ocean, and turned the upstairs into her home and the downstairs into the Thelma Todd Sidewalk Cafe. The location is interesting, being as it is a short distance down the hill from the home West shared with Carmen. Yet, he apparently chose to live in the apartment above the restaurant with Todd. So was it jealousy that led to the mysterious death of Thelma Todd? Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, right? Let's delve into the night of the murder. On the night of Saturday, December 14th, 1935, Thelma Todd and her mother were picked up in a rented limousine by their driver, Ernest Peters, taken to a social engagement at the Trocadero in West Hollywood. Peters would later be the last person to see Todd alive, while the last person who would admit to seeing Todd alive. At the event, Todd was said to be in good spirits, but she did have a brief altercation with her ex-husband, Pat DeSico. DeSico was a self-proclaimed agent and movie producer with underworld connections, and he was known for having a violent temper. After just 2 years of marriage to Todd, his frequent outbursts and multiple domestic violence incidences led to her divorce, but DeSico was also in attendance at the event with his date, Margaret Lindsay, a closeted lesbian who was close friends with Thelma Todd. According to reports, Peters dropped Todd off at the steps of her restaurant between 3:30 and 3:45 a.m. Earlier that night, Todd had made plans to meet West at the cafe at around 2 a.m. The pair shared an apartment on the upper floor of the restaurant and were known lovers. West, who was still married to Jewel Carmen at the time, owned the house just a few blocks up the hill from Thelma Todd Sidewalk Cafe. The garage her body was found in belonged to Carmen. According to reports, West was a very jealous man and very involved in Todd's life, which was ironic considering he was still married, but apparently the pair joked before she went out to the party that evening for her not to be late, as he was expecting her home at 2 a.m. In true Todd fashion, she told him she'd see him at 2:05 and left. One theory as to how she ended up in the garage up the hill is that night, even though she was dropped off at the restaurant, was that West was angry with Todd for coming home later than planned and locked her out. Apparently, this wasn't the first time West had done something like that. One account states that when he was questioned later, West characterized his exchange with Thelma as more of a joke than a serious demand on his part, but he locked Thelma out at least once before when he had failed to come home, quote, on time. On that earlier occasion, Thelma had knocked hard enough to break a window and Roland let her in. So that theory is that West was locked out of her apartment and Todd, freezing on that December night, walked up the hill and got into her car to warm up. Since the garage was sealed, she accidentally killed herself with carbon monoxide poisoning. According to the coroner and police reports, Todd went to the garage in a drunken state and got into her Lincoln convertible and started the car. They claimed that it appeared to them that she simply fell asleep at the wheel, and due to her car being parked in a closed garage, she gave herself carbon monoxide poisoning. They ruled it an accidental death. She was just 29 years old, but there is more to this story than meets the eye. There are some inconsistencies and loose ends that point to the direction of foul play. First of all, there is the question of time. She was dropped off at the restaurant around 3:30 early Sunday morning, and no one found her until Monday morning, somewhere around 9:30 a.m. That seems strange, doesn't it, for a hot Hollywood it girl with a booming restaurant and nightclub to go missing for over 24 hours and have no one reported. This makes me think that it is more than an accidental death. Her body was found in the garage of Jewel Carmen at 17531 Postano Road in Malibu, and according to crime scene photos, her shoes showed no trademark scuffs of an uphill walk. According to British journalist Christopher Snowdon, Thelma was cold and unable to get into her apartment at the locked cafe, so she trudged up to her car, which was parked in the garage, and started it up and turned on the heater. Her body was found by her maid at 9:30 on Monday morning when the maid went out to get her car. She immediately noticed something wasn't right because the door to the garage was slightly opened. She looked into the garage and she saw Todd dead on the car. Todd was wearing what she had worn to the social engagement at the Trocadero on Saturday night, what Los Angeles Times writer Robert W. Welkos described as a mauve and silver evening gown, expensive mink wrap, and it was adorned with a small fortune in jewelry. Police reports stated that she was found in the driver's seat, but the original report said something different. According to historian Randy Young, who had interviewed several Costa Lumiere residents from the time, the local service station operator appeared on the scene ahead of them, and he said he saw Thelma dead in the passenger seat, kind of leaning over. That seems a bit odd, doesn't it? According to that report, Thelma's body was wedged under the steering wheel, as surviving photographs clearly indicate. Those same pictures show no sign of blood or other injuries, yet reporters neighbors on the scene claimed they saw bloodstains on the seat earlier and that she had sustained what appeared to be a broken nose. She had broken ribs and bruises to her face and throat, they said. The autopsy report mentions only a small spot of blood on her lip, conducted which came when her head struck the steering wheel as she lost consciousness. This is not exactly what the coroner and police report said. So, were those reports faked, or were the accounts given from the scene mistaken or over-dramatized? Her body was also found covered in bruises that were later deemed to be from the beginning of the decomposition process. But last time I checked, decomposition didn't result in broken ribs. According to reports, when her body was found, her face was bright red and she had a broken nose, 2 broken ribs, and bruises around her neck. Despite the signs of injury, both the coroner and grand jury found that Todd had committed suicide and carbon monoxide was the cause of death. The time of death is what seems really strange. The autopsy report also found partially digested peas and carrots in her stomach, and according to the coroner's report, she had ingested them 5 or 6 hours earlier, before her body was found. So if her body was found at 9:30 a.m., she would have had to have eaten the peas and carrots somewhere around 5 a.m. on Monday. Yet, according to police, the last person to see her alive was her driver around 3:45 a.m. early Sunday morning, over 24 hours before her body was found. So according to reports, the coroner said Thelma may have been dead for about 12 hours before she was discovered, but a few witnesses came forward to swear that they had seen or spoken to Thelma on Sunday afternoon at a time when, according to the coroner, she would have already been dead. So if she was only dead for 12 hours before her body was found, then she would have had to have died around 9 p.m. on Sunday night. What happened between 3:30 Sunday morning until 9 p.m. Sunday night? What did Thelma do during those missing hours? That same report goes on to account for the most compelling of the witnesses who had claimed to have seen or spoken to Thelma on Sunday, Mrs. Martha Ford. She and her husband, actor Wallace Ford, were hosting a party that day to which Todd had been invited. She said that she received a telephone call and that she at first thought the caller was a woman named Thelma, who was expected to be at the party, but then the caller identified herself as Thelma and used the nickname Hot Toddy. Martha said that Toddy asked her if she could show up in the evening clothes she'd worn the night before to a party. Martha told her that that was fine, Toddy. Also, she said she was bringing a surprise guest and said, "You just wait until I walk in. You'll fall dead." Miss Ford was absolutely convinced that she had spoken with Thelma and not an imposter. Tell me that's not weird. First of all, asking to come to a daytime party in the evening gown she had worn the night before in itself is strange, and the fact that she called to ask to do so is weird too. It seems like she was being put up to it, if it was even her at all. Another thing that seems very strange to me is how her mother acted. According to reports, once Todd's body was found, reporters stormed the scene, and when Alice Todd arrived, she exited the car and dramatically shouted to the press, "My daughter was murdered." That is definitely not how I would have acted. I had just found out my daughter was dead too, and actually thought that someone had murdered her. It appears to onlookers that she was making a scene, and that this was before she had even seen the body. So it would appear that her mother was either in on it or knew something more. Another thing to look at is Thelma's ties to the mob world. Through her ex-husband Pat DeSico, Thelma was introduced to the infamous mobster Lucky Luciano, who was working with Al Capone at the time. Luciano had apparently made it known that he wanted to take over Thelma's restaurant and nightclub due to the high-profile clientele to use as a gambling casino in cahoots with the mob. Todd and Luciano had apparently had dinner shortly before her death at the Brown Derby, where he openly pressured her to give him over the control of the establishment. She allegedly said, "You'll open a gambling casino in my restaurant over my dead body," threw down her napkin and stormed out. He apparently sat back very calmly and said that can be arranged. Thelma apparently felt so threatened that after the meeting she made an appointment with the DA's office. She never made it to that meeting with them. One account states that after being dropped off at a restaurant by her driver, Luciano pulled up in his car and told her to get in. It wouldn't seem far-fetched that he would have known about her to have called the DA. LA had a notoriously corrupt police department at that time, and Luciano knew that if she talked, he would be in trouble. So he drove her around for a bit to calm her down and to see if she had talked yet. Apparently they stopped off, and that's where she had the peas and carrots that were found in her stomach, as well as the high amount of alcohol that the coroner would find later, a blood alcohol level of 0.13. I don't know if I agree with the second part of that theory, because they would have had to be driving for a long time, since according to the coroner she would have had to have eaten the peas and carrots either very late Sunday or early Monday, so he would have had to have been with her for nearly 24 hours. As the investigation continued, the lead detective on the case apparently began getting threatening calls. One account states he was deeper in the mystery, receiving threatening calls which carried a secret and unlisted number. He was warned to lay off if you know what is good for you. In a time where the police could be bought and the mob had the power, that's a pretty threatening call to receive. That same account continues in his investigation. The detective stopped and searched an automobile of a powerful motion picture figure in the car. Surprisingly, was a witness who had reported that Miss Todd had been seen on Sunday near where the witness was and had a packed suitcase. The investigator told me that the owner of the car attempted to have him pushed from the police department, which made it look like Todd knew that she was a threat to the mob, was in danger, and tried to skip town, but she didn't get too far. Another weird thing, there was a half smudge print on the car door that didn't belong to Todd. So who touched the car door? The police ran prints and did tests, by everything came out inconclusive, so we may never know. So what if it was a suicide or an accidental death? She did have a potato clause in her studio contract that said that if she gained more than 5 or 10 pounds, her contract would immediately be terminated. Yikes. That was quite a lot of pressure, and according to reports, early on in her career in Hollywood, she started taking diet pills to keep her weight down. Diet pills in the 1920s and 30s were relatively a new thing and didn't have a ton of research done back then, so maybe a side effect of these pills was depression. That just seems so incredibly slim of a chance. But she had an amazing career, a thriving business, and the support of the people she loved in her life. According to reports, she had just gone Christmas shopping, and her trunk was filled with presents. Does that sound like someone who wants to kill themselves? If it was a murder, which I think it was, who could have done it? Well, the first suspect is Roland West, the director and sometimes lover and business partner of Thelma Todd. He had been known wishes. Was this just another night for him? There were accounts of neighbors hearing a screaming match between the two. Todd, upset, and West said that she is going to leave and go to another party. There are accounts that West then left the house and followed Todd and locked the door to the garage where her car was, and after he had gotten in and turned it on, it doesn't take long for carbon monoxide to make you feel dizzy, especially if you had just been drinking at a swanky Hollywood party. Apparently the next morning, West went back to the garage to see if Todd had learned her lesson, but she was dead. West panicked and called his friend at Fox and then pulled favors in the LAPD to ensure that West would never be charged with manslaughter. So was West upset that he couldn't tame the wild sexual spirit and life of the party nature that Todd lived by. He was the one not only who lived with the star, but apparently locked her out that night. Did he slap her around a bit in a jealous rage and try to cover it up by making it look like an accidental suicide? After Todd's death, West never worked again in Hollywood. Oh, and there's the deathbed confession made by West. According to his IMDb page, in 1952 he confessed to longtime friend and actor Chester Morris that he was the one who killed Thelma Todd back in 1935. So does that mean that he did it? According to another suspect, we have Thelma Todd's ex-husband Pat DeSico, who was an ex-pimp, bootlegger, and self-described agent and movie producer with alleged underworld connections. DeSico was one of the main suspects. Him and Todd had been seen arguing earlier that evening, and that wasn't the first time. Him and Todd divorced after one too many beatings. One theory is that he felt humiliated and may have sought revenge. A few years after Todd's death, DeSico married heiress Gloria Vanderbilt when she was just 17 years old. After spending her millions, he left her. He's some kind of stellar guy. Another suspect, the infamous mobster's Lucky Luciano. After pressuring Todd to hand over her restaurant and after her over my dead body comment, he responded with, "That can be arranged." Luciano was involved in prostitution, gambling, and extortion in Los Angeles, and he and Todd had a notorious relationship. He was allegedly the one who got her hooked on amphetamines. According to reports, Luciano flew out of Los Angeles at 7 a.m. on Monday morning before Todd's body was even found. He never returned. And what about West's wife, Jewel Carmen? Carmen, whose garage Todd's body was found in, was a friend of Todd and also Roland's, West's wife. She didn't object to her husband's interactions with Todd, but when the restaurant started to lose money, she apparently threatened to kill Todd for wasting her money on investing in the restaurant. And lastly, Alice Todd, Thelma's mother. She was her daughter's sole heir, and shortly before Thelma's death, she announced to friends a plan to build a huge mansion. Where did she plan to get the funds to do so? So, what happened? One theory is that Todd and West got into it that night. She came home later than they had agreed upon, and she was extremely intoxicated. This is a fine theory, but it doesn't account for the fact that she had only been dead for a maximum of 12 hours when she was found at around 9:30 on Monday morning. It also doesn't account for the partially digested peas and carrots in her stomach. What's hard about this case is that it was so quickly deemed a suicide and no precise time of death was determined. That's a bit strange. Some theorize that she was killed on Sunday or even early Monday and then dresses back in the gown and jewels she wore on Saturday night as to make the time of death appear to be some part late Saturday or even early Sunday. I think that this might be a stretch stretch based on the crime scene photos. Her hair appears to be done the same as it was on her outing to Sunset Trocadero. This case has kept me up many nights, and what I think happened was this. Todd came home from the party that night way later than she had agreed upon with West. She was dropped off at around 3:30 a.m. West was upset with her and locked her out of her apartment, which he had done before. She wasn't able to get in. She fought with the door and banged on multiple windows, but West probably was in a drunken state himself Saturday night and didn't hear her cries to be let in. Someone from the mob, or Lucky Luciano himself, did come to the cafe that night, and Todd, hungry and dehydrated from drinking, got in their car. I think that she was held hostage, made to call Miss Ford because she was expected at her barbecue and was knocked out, but not to the point of death, perhaps with alcohol. Her blood alcohol content was very high. She was put in her car in the garage of Jewel Carmen and turned on in the sealed garage to make it look like an accidental death. So do you think I'm right? Was it a murder? Do you think it was a mob hit? What are your theories? As always, there are various theories when it comes to Hollywood murder mysteries. Okay, so this is a pretty interesting case, like so many of the other ones. Some of the details that they didn't mention in this article, but were in some of the other ones that I had read, was, first of all, the party that she went to that night. On Saturday night, she was the main attraction, or of that particular party was held in her name. And at the Trocadero, so she was over there. She was having a great time. She was the life of the party anyway, but since she was the main attraction, everything was about her. And that particular party was set up, the seating arrangement was set up by Carmen, the ex-prostitute, former wife of Roland West, and the agent or former husband, DeSico, for whatever reasons, jokingly said, put my seat next to Thelma. And so Carmen did, but DeSico had no plans of sitting next to Thelma. He said that he had only mentioned that as a joke, because he had come with this date, the former friend of Thelma to begin with. Anyway, they have a small kind of interaction at the party where, she's having a good time, and then I guess any exchange with him is upsetting, and they had maybe a little tiff at the party itself. But DeSico left at some point, and it was not maybe considered that big of a deal. Now, the plans that she had with Roland West was that she was supposed to meet him at the restaurant at 2 a.m. And he had made a big deal about her being there on time at 2 a.m. For some meeting at the restaurant. So at 1:50, she calls Roland West, like from the Trocadero, so they have that on file that she made this phone call, requested a phone call to her residence, told him that she would be leaving soon, and that was the end of the phone call. It was just, a courtesy call, I guess, to Roland West. Well, she didn't roll up to the restaurant until 3:30. She's alive and well at this point, because her driver is taking her there. But at some time, a little after 2, she's still at the party, kind of winding down, and somebody sends her a note. So it's now past the time that she should have already left and already been at the restaurant. She's given a note, and her mood dramatically shifts according to the people at the party. Nobody knows what was in the note, but she read something and got very upset. So nobody nobody knows what the heck that was about, but she left immediately after. So it seems like that particular note was either from Roland West or from Luciano. I don't think it was from Roland West. I don't think she would be particularly upset if it was a message from Roland West that come home right now or something like that, because they had a very loose kind of relationship. It was almost like roommates but with benefits, and they had an on again off again situation, and she had other boyfriends around town, so I don't think she really would have cared what was going on in terms of Roland West, requesting her to come. But Lucky Luciano was supposed to meet with her and Roland West. Now, Roland West was the co-owner of her restaurant. Roland West and his wife Carmen had invested in that restaurant along with her. The restaurant was losing money, and Carmen West was upset about this. The reason that it was losing money, according to other reports, was the whatever mob involvement had already been incurred during that time period. They were forcing them to buy from very specific distributors that were overpricing the goods and services that they were getting, and therefore the restaurant couldn't turn a profit. And this was being done on purpose to force Thelma Todd to either be bought out, that she would get into a situation where she just wanted to get out of the restaurant, and Lucky Luciano would then take over, which was apparently the plan. And Roland West, as well as Carmen West, had no problem with what do you call it? It being turned into a gambling site. They had a floor above, in between where the apartment was and the restaurant was on the bottom floor, but there was an empty floor above that, and that's where Lucky Luciano wanted to set up his gambling ring or whatever. Wanted to kind of ensnare as many Hollywood bigwigs as possible, specifically studio heads, and his plan was that he would get various studio heads into severe debt, and then somehow through this involvement he would be able to force his way into the studio system, because they would have to sell him pieces of it until he would own various studios. So he had made his plans known. In general, Roland West didn't have a problem with it, and Carmen West didn't have a problem with it, but Thelma Todd did, and she was the main issue who was rejecting Luciano and this plan. She didn't want a gambling ring in her restaurant/apartment setup. This was going to be her nest egg, essentially. She was going to retire into, being this hostess of this restaurant, but she was basically being muscled out, and her, roommate/boyfriend was kind of in on this situation, that he was pressuring her along with Luciano, and he was helping to facilitate these meetings. So they had a contentious situation right in the end. That was part of the fight that was going on before she left for the party. So the thing about her coming on time at 2 a.m. was to meet Luciano at the restaurant. So at whatever, 2:15 or 2:30, whenever she got the note, it was probably that Luciano was there or very upset, or it was directly from Luciano that she better come home right now or come back to the restaurant or something of that nature. Something upset her. It could have been from West, but basically saying that, Luciano was now angry. After that point, she apparently leaves kind of upset. She's very quiet in the limo drive home. Usually she's very talkative and so forth, but the limo driver said that she was very quiet and looked distressed. So he dropped her off in front of the restaurant. Now the way that this restaurant, I'll show you some pictures in a second, The way that this restaurant is set up, the restaurant is right on the street, and the house that is owned by Roland West is, quite a bit up the hill. There's a garage that's not attached to the house, but it's like a separate garage, which is where Carmen kept her cars. And one spot was given to Thelma to keep her car, her convertible, in that car, but it was a very long trek to go from the bottom, from the street level up the hill to where that garage was. So Thelma Todd didn't like making the trek up. It was very difficult anyway. You'd either have to walk up 250 steps to get to that area, or you could climb over some sort of hilly terrain. It was just not a plausible thing for her to do, and definitely she wouldn't want to do that on a daily basis. So her situation was set up so that her maid would make that trek every day and bring her convertible from the garage that was up the hill down to the restaurant every day. So that's the reason that the maid, even went there at 9:30 a.m. on Monday, because that was part of her job, is to bring the convertible down every day. Thelma could not make that walk up the hill. She had bad ankles from various injuries, and so she didn't like walking up the stairs, or basically couldn't do that particular trek, especially in heels. To go from the restaurant up to where the garage was. So she's dropped to the restaurant. It's middle of December, so it's kind of chilly outside in LA. And according to witnesses that were in the area, she's dropped off right at the restaurant. She doesn't go into the restaurant, but instead another car pulls up, and she gets into that somewhat hesitantly. And according to whether it was eyewitnesses or whomever, that was Lucky Luciano, who had pulled up and was basically waiting for her to get dropped off. Now, was Roland West also in the car? No one knows if he was involved in any capacity, but he had set up the meeting for them. So now it wasn't happening right at the restaurant. They went to another restaurant, the Brown Derby. So she was maybe a little hungover, or she had, maybe a little tipsy from the night, the party at the Trocadero. So she's given food. So we're into Sunday already. She's given food. She eats peas and carrots apparently over there. Just the beginning of the meal, and a fight breaks out between those two because she doesn't want to hand over the restaurant. So he had already created the position that the restaurant was becoming more and more indebted to the mob distributors, and he was going to buy her out, basically saying that you don't have a choice, you gotta give me the restaurant. And she knew exactly what he wanted to do with it, so she said no. And according to witnesses, he maybe made a comment about her death being something that could be arranged. Whether he actually said, that's kind of dramatic and like a movie. He may not have said anything, but apparently there was an angry bout where she threw the napkin down and walked out. So now, how is she getting home? Nobody knows, because nobody really has seen her after that point. They said that Lucky Luciano just sits back and doesn't leave. But that part could have been made up. His driver could have picked her up. I don't know that she would be so silly as to leave in his car. It could have also been Roland West. Nobody says if he was at that meeting or not, but I think it's possible that he was either at the meeting or picked her up after the meeting. Something happened. She somehow got from that restaurant that was on, occurring at some point during Sunday, and somehow she was driven back to that garage up on the hill. So, and it wasn't by her driver, because he had left her there the night before. So, something happened. There was somehow she got from one location to the other. So let's say that it was either Roland or Lucky Luciano who was involved with her getting from point A to point B. Something happened. If it was Luciano, then you can probably assume that all of the injuries that she had, the ribs and the choke marks and all of these things, that might have occurred right in the limousine that they were in. That's very possible. If it was Roland, yes, he had a bad temper and they had gotten into fights before, and then he has this deathbed confession where he says that he was involved. Actually, there are two accounts of what he says. In the first account, he says he knows more about the Thelma Todd murder than he admitted to. And then in this other one, he's saying that he did it. I don't think he said that he did it. He might have said that he knows more about it, than he's admitting to. And what he knew about it was that she had met Luciano that night. And so I believe that Luciano is the one who, maybe not himself, but one of his associates, was the one who did her in at the end, the choking and all of this business. So that happened. And then she was taken back to the house and carried probably up the steps and put in her convertible and left there, in a closed garage. The thing is, one, that was Carmen's garage, so she did not have the keys to it. The maid had the keys. Roland West would have had the keys, and Carmen would have had the keys. So probably by the point that Thelma Todd was dead, Roland West was now somewhat probably involved, in a sense that he's letting somebody into the garage, whether he's taking the body up or it's somebody else and he's letting them in. He's the one who has the keys. She doesn't have the keys to that garage. The theory about her being locked out of her apartment and then walking up herself, that's unlikely. She had the keys to her apartment in her purse. So, she wasn't locked out of any place. She could have easily gone up to her apartment if she had been alive. So, when she got back to that restaurant area, she was taken up to the car. The other thing is, for them to say that it was carbon monoxide poisoning, there was carbon monoxide in her system, yes. However, her car was not running at the time like her car would be running if, she's starting the car, warming it up or whatever, and the door is closed. It would have still been running, but the car was not on. And she supposedly was even in the passenger seat, not in the driver's seat. So the car apparently had been turned on. There was still gas in the car, and then it had been turned off when I guess they felt that enough carbon monoxide had, been in her system to prove this other situation. And I guess that's probably how that part of it happened. And then for her to be switched over to the other side, all of that seems to have occurred afterwards, because there were eyewitnesses right in the beginning that all said she was in the passenger side. There was blood on the seat, there was blood on her lip, there were clear bruise marks and all of this other stuff on her face and neck. And they claimed, more than one person is claiming this. Then when the police finally show up, all of that stuff changes in the report, that no, she is in the driver's seat. That's how the photographs are taken, but she is very much wedged into the driver's seat in those pictures. So which makes people think she was moved, probably by the police, and they think that those officers were in cahoots with the mob, to make this seem even more like it was some sort of a suicide. So they put her into the other side of the car and, turned the car. The car was already off, so there was not that issue. But, the rest of it, the carbon monoxide and all of that, was all they needed to say that it was a mistake, suicide on her part. But I don't think it was. So I think that probably Luciano or his guys did it because she was the main, she was the main issue that was blocking their gambling, the plans. And Roland West definitely knew about what was going on since he's the one setting up the meetings. And whether his wife Carmen probably knew too because she's an investor in the restaurant. And one of them let her in to that garage. That's Carmen's garage. So somebody opened the door. One of those two had the keys. It wasn't the maid, so it was either Roland or his wife. So one of those guys let them in, and that was probably early Sunday morning. And nobody calls the police because Roland knows that the maid's gonna come to the garage anyway on Monday. It doesn't make sense that Roland wouldn't, if he's expecting someone at 2 a.m. the night previous, and then they never show up. He's apparently a very pushy guy and very much involved with Thelma Todd, that he would want to know, where is she, what's going on, and would not have left it at that. He would have been circulating phone calls and possibly even calling the police to see what had happened to her, or at least the driver, but he didn't call anybody. So that's suspicious. Roland West is definitely suspicious. I don't think he did the murder. I do think that he was involved with this situation. I think that this was probably something a little bit more severe. And since she had had this relationship with Luciano prior to this, that they had this affair, I think that it was either done by him or one of his associates after that second party. Now, the weird thing is the phone call that was made in the middle of Sunday afternoon. Again, it doesn't make any sense unless it's true that she was put up to that call and was a little bit inebriated to begin with. That when she's calling the Mrs. Ford, she is, her voice is sounding like she's saying Thelma, but then it's weird that she would call herself Toddy, but maybe she would, and I think she was a little drunk, and then it's weird for her to ask, can I come in last night's dress, and why is she even making this call? But the fact that she says, I'm gonna bring somebody with me that's gonna knock you dead, that makes me think that Luciano wanted a entrance, basically wanted to make an entrance at that particular event, and that I think is the person who put her up to it. Who else is she gonna bring? She didn't know anybody else really that would be of any significance, and he's clearly a guy who is trying to make his self known within the Hollywood community, and I have a feeling that he's the one who put her up to it. I don't know what the deal with the dress is. That might have been her own concern that, I haven't changed, or, something like that, but the fact that he wanted her to make this announcement. Now, what was the point of this? If he was planning on killing her, I don't think he was maybe planning on killing her. This could have been a, situation where he was angry with her. They got into another fight in this interim, and the decision was just kind of spontaneous of choking her, because that's also sort of a strange way, that seems like more of somebody who has an intimate involvement rather than something that like a hitman would do, So it seems like there was some sort of a fight that happened after this phone call was made. So I think they went out to the Brown Derby. I think Roland was somewhere in the vicinity or knew about it, definitely. And whether he was right there or not, I don't know. I think Luciano probably left the restaurant after her and, said, are you going to get home? It was cold, and so whatever, she agreed to go with him in his car. And she was also spotted by somebody else driving in a car with a guy. They don't know who the guy was, though. So it's probably Luciano. And at some point, the decision is made that, okay, she's going to go to this second party, and this is going to be his intro party. And so she's forced to make this weird phone call. But then that plan doesn't work out because they get into another fight somewhere along the line, and this situation occurs that she passes, and now he has to get rid of her. So he calls Roland, and the rest of it is just get her in a situation where it seems like it's an accidental suicide because Luciano jumps on a plane at 7:45 on Sunday, was it Monday morning? Just before the body is discovered at 9:30. So I think he was involved with this right up until, Monday morning, and then was like, I gotta get out of town. So I think that probably this was a plan where it just was not working out. He was really forcing this issue to take over the club. She was very resistant, and I guess sometimes she would agree maybe with the alcohol or the drugs or whatever. He would get some agreement out of her, and then they would make plans. Okay, so we'll go to this event, this party, and then that phone call was made. But then in that interim, between the afternoon and the next morning, another situation breaks out between them, and it ends up like that. So I think that that's probably is how she passed, was with Lucky Luciano, and I think Roland helped to cover up, the situation by letting them into the garage. And he wasn't going to mess with Luciano for sure. He's not going to disagree with them that, no, don't have it on my property or whatever. But I think that's probably what happened. So that was kind of long. Let me just see if there are some other photographs that I can show you of that area. So 1 second. Okay, so this is another image of Thelma Todd. And, she's very attractive, but you can see a little bit of where already there's something happening behind her eyes. It just seems like she was probably involved with a little bit more, even though she's got a bright smile on, there was a little bit going on behind the eyes. It seemed like she was a little bit tired from what was going on. So this is her sidewalk cafe, and so you can see it's right on the road. Her apartment is above, and then the house that's up that hill is Roland West's house. Okay, I don't know if you can see the garage from here, but this is, so she's left right on the street by the limo driver, and apparently picked up right away by Luciano. Okay, and so this is another viewpoint. Okay, so that's Malibu, the Pacific Highway. This was just, I don't know, a local mudslide. I don't know why they showed that. Later, the restaurant was named Chez Roland, so he took over because he had the controlling interest in the restaurant, and it actually did become a gambling spot, so he very quickly allowed it to become a gambling spot. But the thing is that without Thelma Todd and her celebrity, friends and so forth coming in, it just really did not take off. It became more of a seedy place, but it wasn't the club that Luciano wanted it to be, because that was really because of her that it was such a Hollywood hotspot. But it did last for a certain period of time. Okay, so this was the cocktail rooms. You could see really amazing high ceilings, and it would definitely be a swanky place to go to, right in Malibu. And the bar is the main, attraction, but everyone had, there was like lounging seats, and it would definitely be a happening kind of place. Okay, so here are some of the locations of what happened, where everything was. So you have the street where she was left, her apartment, which is the second story section above it, and then the location of the house, which is the building that's behind it. It looks like it's on top of it's behind it. And then there are, if you look to the right, I mean to the left of the house, there's like a strip, but those are steps. Those are 270 steps that go up that hill, and then up that hill is where the garage is. And so they're saying, the police are saying that she walked from the street through this rugged area, then going up to the, finally getting up to where the steps are, and then going all the way up those steps in the middle of the night on Saturday in heels. The heels also do not show that, any scuff marks or anything from that kind of a trek, neither did her dress or ankles. Her feet were also clean, so it's not that she took her shoes off. So she was carried. She did not make the trek up to that area, and she probably wouldn't have, because the whole point of her maid picking her car up and bringing it down was so that she wouldn't have to make this long walk up the hill. She didn't like to. She said she physically couldn't because of her ankles. So that theory is wrong of, that she's walking up these, walking up so many steps in the middle of the night. I don't think so. I think she was carried there, and it was probably done on Sunday. I don't know about what that theory about the suitcases, and there was only like one person who said something like that. There was not enough information on that, if she was trying to skip town or something. I don't think she was the type to skip town. She was clearly someone who sat there and fought, but she was fighting with really dangerous people. Okay, so here you can see how the steps were, and this is like 270 of them going up very rugged type of terrain. And in the beginning, before you get to the steps, you have to go up. You can see how the terrain is. You have to access first through a very ruggedy, muddy area. So it's not really possible that she would have done this, or probable. It's not really probable that she would have done that. Okay, so that's just showing where the house was. Okay, so that's about it. Those were the main photographs. Anyway, so this is an interesting story. Some people think that, the incident occurred right at the restaurant, but she was seen at the Brown Derby with Luciano, so I do think that they went to another place and got the food. That's where the peas and carrots were. At some point on Sunday, in the middle of Sunday, and then later on in the afternoon, she made that phone call, probably a little bit inebriated. Some people think that it was a fake call made by Carmen. That's possible, but then what was the point of even making the call to make an introduction of what? She was never going to show up, but that, could have been some angle that they were planning on doing of how to, make some sort of a cover-up in another direction that just didn't go through. But I think it was probably Thelma forced by Luciano to make the call, asking about the dress and whatnot. And then at some point between the late afternoon and into the early morning hours, something happened to Thelma Todd, and then the plan was that to leave her, in the garage, and the only people who would have been able to let her in the garage outside of the maid were Roland or his wife Carmen. So I think that is where they got involved, and that's probably where Roland's guilt is, his deathbed confession comes from, knowing more than he ever told the police was probably this, amount that, look, he helped do this final thing because he was scared of Luciano and he was feeling forced, and there was nothing he could do about it. He was also indebted to the mob, and this was the only way for him to keep the restaurant, so probably that's what happened. And it's sad because I think she had not only a promising career, but, she was somebody who was smart in terms of her business choices. The problem was she was really not that smart in terms of her relationship choices. She was getting involved with one character after another, all very intense sort of personalities, and I think it led to business to sort of slide into after her acting career was done. But because of Roland's involvement with the mafia, and I guess they needed some extra money to get things started, she ended up becoming indebted to them, and which was the plan all along. So, you know, she, I think, was smart, but then she got involved with people who were just a little bit too dangerous and manipulative, and she wasn't able to get out of it, and fighting it out was not the way. That was not the way to do it. You know, she probably would have been smart to just leave, but I don't think she was the type. Anyway, so that's the story of Thelma Todd and my particular take on it. So I hope you guys enjoyed